incredibly talented rock stars. And I am so pleased to have you here. Welcome. Please take it away, Alissa.
Thank you, Pete. You know, one of my favorite things is to just sit down and chat with you about our favorite subject, but I'm excited that today we can kind of talk about a little bit of your background and how you got here. So first thing I want to just kind of ask you is, what inspired you to get into cause-related work?
Yeah, well, thanks again, Tom, for having us, and Alissa, thanks so much for taking the time to hang today. I was honestly, growing up as a kid, it was just something that, maybe you don't think about until you're an adult, but it was something that was really a big part of my life. The two things that kind of stand out for me personally were the fact, number one, I had an uncle that was just a few years older than I was growing up that has Down syndrome. And growing up with him, we never thought anything of it until we started, hanging out in the playground and doing sports activities with him, and other people, started to say things, maybe things that were rude or unflattering, and I really took offense to that, and I really was bothered by it, and didn't understand why he was being treated differently or being talked about differently, and that was one of the earliest memories I have of feeling like, hey, something's not right here. Why are people being treated differently, or how come people aren't being given the same opportunities? And that really kind of inspired me, I think, to try to be an ally to folks that were kind of the subject of other people's poor behavior or being treated wrongly. And then, one of the other moments I think that was impactful for me was also as a young kid, my stepsister was diagnosed with leukemia when she was, just a couple years old. And, seeing a young kid go through that, and I was only, a few years older than her, I couldn't, it was hard to process. And I think one of the things, again, I look back on as an adult was that, one of the things that I remember doing when she was so little, battling this was, watching Disney movies and singing Disney songs with her. And now, fast forward to where we're at now, I look back at it and being like, gosh, we were using music as a way to help heal and help someone, get through a tough time, both them and probably myself as a young kid, not knowing how to deal with, these emotions and feelings. And I'll fast forward and say that, she's now, 30 something years old and is recovered fine and has a great life and career. But, those are, I think, two moments growing up where I, both recognized that we got to be there to help one another and support one another and fight for people that, may need allies. And then also the fact that, there's different things that we use and others use to make themselves feel better and deal with pressure and tough times. And music is one of those things. And ultimately, I think, that's also what may have led me here.
I love that. I think that's something that you and I actually share in common, which is why I think we get along so well, is that we have a love for music. We actually have careers that have been in the music industry, but we also have been motivated by different things in our life that got us really interested in doing cause-related work. So I know you've worked in MTV and you've had, other history with like Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So talk about a little bit about the transition of going from, a corporate music job into really just focusing on the cause-related work.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, I think, because, when I graduated college, I had a business degree. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. It was one of those things where it's like, you're about to graduate and you're like, heck, I got this degree, but what do I do with it? And so I said, I just kind of took inventory of the things that I really loved. And I was really passionate about music. Now, don't ask me to play a note because I would make someone's day a lot worse versus better. But I just was really passionate about music. And so we had an alumni from my college, which was Bucknell, that worked as the VP of advertising at Sony Music in New York. And man, I just harassed the heck out of her until I basically, made her submit into allowing me to intern for her after graduation, so I could see, how the music industry worked and get some experience. So I worked at Sony Music back on, was it 55th and Madison back in the day, and and was there for a few months before the internship ended. And I was sitting on my couch trying to figure out what to do next. And lo and behold, my first boss called me out of the blue. Now imagine, like, you know, getting a call from MTV. I hadn't even applied for a job there. And she called me and she said, you know, I'm looking for an assistant, and I talked to, you know, Yvonne over at Sony Music, and she said, you're looking for a job. Would you want to interview? And I, like, literally almost fell out of the chair. I vividly remember watching Oprah and being like, oh my gosh, I just got a call from MTV. And, you know, fast forward, I was, you know, got the job as an assistant in ad sales there. And at that point in my life, you know, I was young, and I just said to myself, like, I want to move up the ladder as quickly as I can. I want to try to make as much money as I can. And I would love to, because I really love traveling, I would love to figure out a way that I can, you know, start working internationally or something, and at a brand that I really love. And MTV was certainly a brand I loved. And that's what I did. I worked really, really hard and just was very focused on moving up in business. And that was kind of it. It was very singular focus. How do I, you know, excel at what I do here at work, taking on extra jobs, whatever I can. And I say that all because by the time I was, like, you know, 27 years old, I got this job at MTV working for their international marketing partnerships team. And I was put in this position where I was working with this team that was all over the world. I was traveling to meetings in London and Amsterdam for work. And it was like, it was the job I had always dreamed of, right? And I got there, and I would wake up each morning saying to myself, what excuse can I give not to come to work today? I was just unhappy. And it wasn't the job, it wasn't the people. Like, I absolutely loved the people I worked with. But I got to this point where I was like, it was like where I wanted to be, yet I felt really unfulfilled just in life, you know, and it was probably less about the job, but more just in life. I just wasn't feeling happy. And so I just really was having a tough time at that point in my life. And I you know, kind of took a little inventory of what I was doing that made me happy. And I realized that in the little bit of free time I had, I was volunteering. I was teaching science at the Museum of Natural History in New York on Sundays to kids. I was helping with Life Bee, which is a music industry fights HIV/AIDS campaign in New York. I was working on a Save Darfur campaign. I was volunteering at a women's shelter in New York, helping women from, you know, domestic and substance abuse situations get business skills. And I was like, well, this is what I'm doing in the little time I have, because I really enjoy it. Maybe I should try to do that full time and not something I do on the side. And so I ended up resigning from that position at MTV, only to have, and I explained why. I was like, you know, I explained kind of this life crisis I was having, only for MTV, like 3 months later, to hire me back, but this time to work on their public affairs team, which works on the social cause campaigns for MTV. So I was doing all the, you know, the on-air things you would see on MTV around social issues, around climate change, around covering the presidential elections, around high school completion, around sexual health, all these types of things. And I absolutely loved it. And I kind of felt like I had found my home. And it was a beautiful transition too, because I was with a brand and a company I knew inside and out, having worked there for so long. But they kind of challenged me to say, hey, you know, you were really good at convincing our audience to buy Nikes and buy PlayStation games. Maybe you can use those skills to help them get engaged in these causes that are really affecting their generation. And so that's what I did. And after we went through the 2008 presidential elections, and all that was, for our country and for me professionally, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go and start working, full time in the nonprofit sector. And so I left MTV and went down to DC to help, organize young people around climate and energy issues and work with the White House a bit on that. And it was that was my transition. But I got really lucky in the fact that I was able to segue at a really high level, right? Because when I was working at MTV on these causes, I had access to every foundation and nonprofit literally in the world, right? Because if MTV calls you and says, hey, we want to work with you on this, you pick up the phone and you say, okay, what can we do there? And so getting to work with so many different artists and so many different great foundations and so many brilliant people at MTV, to be honest, so super creative people and passionate people, really was my segue, into this space. And I think it really helped set me up to have that, to succeed, to have that corporate background to begin with before heading into, the nonprofit world.
I really relate to that, Pete, because I feel like I had similar experiences of, being asked to participate in certain charities, as a representative of iHeart, but because I had marketing skills and, I was able to apply a lot of what I did with my job, with brands, with artists, and just put the charity element into it. And, I remember way at the beginning, I was obviously the youngest, poorest person on, one of the committees I had been asked to be part of. And I realized by the end of that campaign that I had raised more money than anyone else simply because I had no choice but to be super creative and super scrappy in the way I couldn't really write the check that some of the other people could. So I really had to think about, how am I going to participate? But I think when you raise money for a charity or you realize that you're affecting someone's life, there is such a different, it's rewarding to accomplish anything at work and at your job, but I do think there's a different feeling that you get when you realize that something that you've done has literally saved a life or made someone's life better. So I do know that I feel like that can be an addictive feeling, once you get to realizing, hey, I could work just as hard as I am doing something else, but man, I'm really changing the world with it. So I commend you for recognizing that so often and really, making that your focus in life when you took those skills that you had that I'm sure you could have, risen really high at some of those corporate ranks, but you've done such a fantastic job as a leader of a nonprofit. And I know you have a lot of passions about different things. I know veterans is another thing that's something you're passionate about. And I know we've done some cool campaigns like with Nat Geo and Lady A around launching veterans programs, but where does where does the veterans inspiration come from as well?
Yeah, well, I just want to comment on something you said first, which was really important because, the thing that you've been able to do, especially to help us, is to leverage these great relationships you have with artists and brands to really help the charity and therefore make a difference in the lives of people, especially through your dad's fund, the Jason Pollack Memorial Fund. But when I made that transition, so many people said to me, oh, it's very noble that you've given up your career or that you've gone this different path, and I wish I could do something like that or whatever. And it's like, no, we all can do it. And it doesn't mean you have to change jobs and go to the nonprofit space, but like Alissa, what you're doing is doing it. Like we can all make the decision to say, you know what, I'm going to leverage the resources, the connections, the skills that I have to help someone else or to help an organization. And so like my friends that were bankers are like, gosh, I wish I could do something like that. I'm like, no. Continue banking, make a lot of money, and then donate to my organization or other organizations. Like continue doing what you're passionate about, but maybe make a point that you're going to make sure that you're using those skills and resources to help other people as well. And then we're all part of the same cycle here. But getting back to the veterans piece, it's actually kind of funny. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with the military. From watching G.I. Joe to dressing in camouflage to growing up in New York, like in the shadows of West Point. And my family also has a very long military history in the U.S. I mean, all the way back to the French Indian War and the Revolutionary War and so forth. It's kind of like Lieutenant Dan when you're watching Forrest Gump and you have like all the family in the different wars. It's kind of my family, and so I always felt growing up like I was going to go in the military. I always thought I was going to go to West Point and then join the military. That was kind of like if you were asking me what I was going to do through most of my life, that was it. And then as I got older, I started getting recruited for basketball, and then that kind of opened my eyes to other opportunities in schools, and I ended up, going to Bucknell, as I said. But I always felt this obligation to serve. And I think whether it was service in the community or service in the military or something, I always felt an obligation personally to serve in that sense of community, that we should all be out there serving one another. And obviously for me, it ended up not being the military, but that community specifically, I felt like it was very important to support them because it's we have a volunteer military, people that sign up to put their lives on the line so that we can all continue to do what we do. And when I was at MTV, we were approaching the 2008 presidential elections. And, we were in a meeting and it was probably like 2 years out. It was like 2006. We're like, what are we going to do this year? What are we going to do around the elections? And, typically MTV was known for, Choose or Lose and our campaigns with Rock the Vote and all that. And, we felt like, young people for a lot of different reasons were going to turn out this year. We didn't have to twist our arm to vote. So is there something else we could do? And after doing a lot of research, we realized that so many young people, when you ask them, what is a veteran? They said they thought it was the people, marching in the parades growing up, the World War II and the Vietnam and Korean War veterans that we, may have seen in parades growing up. But they weren't realizing that there was these 23 and 24 and 25-year-old veterans coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan and coming home from other areas of service in the world. And they further didn't realize that really a lot of the benefits and support for veterans hadn't been updated since the Vietnam War. And so whereas we all might have thought, hey, you're in the military, you get out of the military, you become a veteran and you're taken care of, right? They're going to cover your medical bills. And that wasn't the case, sadly. And so we ended up starting a campaign in 2008, MTV's entire coverage of the presidential elections was in the context of veterans and what we could do to support young veterans. And so I really got my hands dirty in trying to help the veterans community there. And that led me to eventually Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, which is a nonprofit my buddy Paul Rykoff started. And the first, nonprofit for post 9/11 veterans in the country. And so I was kind of able to carry that passion with me through the years. And then I get to Musicians on Call, and we had incredible programs going on at VA hospitals. And so that's been something that we've really made a point to do is really build and grow our programs at VA hospitals so that we can support, veterans and their families, as well as the VA caregivers through our programs. And, one of the things that we always say here at Musicians on Call, because we do a big Veterans Day concert, we get all these great artists, but we play in these VA hospitals year round. And so we have a saying here that, Veterans Day is every day at Musicians on Call. We want to make sure that, the veterans community knows we're here to support them every single day, not just once a year. And I really appreciate that about our organization and the people and volunteers we work with, that they have that same passion too.
As you're talking, you just really summed up and keep reminding me of what I love about Musicians on Call, because again, I think charity is very subjective, and a lot of times people are interested in something that directly affects them, or they don't really even have a specific thing. But what I think I love best about Musicians on Call is it really is a universal charity. And music and the healing power obviously is something that can affect everybody, male, female, all ages. But specifically, what's great about it is the ability to partner and serve any other subcategory as well, whether that be veterans programs, children's programs. That's what I love about it, is that it's something everyone can align with and something that everyone can get a benefit from or feel that they're, making a difference with. So with that being said, tell us a little bit about the overall mission of Musicians on Call.
Yeah, so, Musicians on Call, our mission is to bring live and recorded music to the bedsides of patients, families, and caregivers in healthcare environments. And there's an interesting story of how we started. And coincidentally, it's fortuitous that we're speaking about this today, because today is Musicians on Call's birthday. Today we are 23 years old. So we celebrated that this morning with our two co-founders. But to take you back to the beginning, in the early 90s, our co-founders, Michael Solomon and Vivek Tiwari, both had loved ones that were in the hospital and that were battling cancer and passed away, unfortunately. But they received great care at Sloan Kettering. And Michael Solomon, in particular, his girlfriend, Kristen Ann Carr, his girlfriend at the time, who passed away. Her mother is Barbara Carr, who many people in the industry know co-manages Bruce Springsteen with John Landau. And so there was obviously connections to the music industry with them and their loved ones. And I even remember Michael telling me a story about when Kristen was in the hospital, that Bruce would come to play at her bedside and she would shoo him away and say, go play for someone else, that needs to hear you. I've heard you enough, which is kind of funny, right? But anyway, so they decided after those folks had passed away that they wanted to do something nice for the hospital. And so they said, let's bring an artist to come play in the lobby of Sloan Kettering in New York. And so they were able to get Wynton Marsalis, huge jazz musician, to come play in the lobby. And they brought all the patients and caregivers down and family members down. And they had this beautiful performance. And it was like amazing. People loved it. So the hospital said, is there any way we could do this again? So they did it a couple more times. And then eventually, after doing it a few more times, a nurse came up to them and said, hey, listen, we've got all these patients that are sitting here in their beds and they can't leave their rooms because of their condition or their treatment. Would you ever consider bringing a musician to go up to their room and play at their bedside for them so that they can benefit of this amazing music that's going on? And that was literally the idea that started Musicians on Call. So, I mean, that's what we do is we bring music to the bedsides of those people needing it the most, whether it's a kid, a veteran, an adult, whether it's someone who's battling cancer or a disease or maybe had a bad injury, whatever it might be. We play for anyone that's in the hospital, in the particular hospitals that we go to. And so fast forward a little bit, they had this idea. In 1996, I believe, Bruce did a show at Madison Square Garden, and he gave proceeds from that show to help start the Kristen Ann Carr Fund for sarcoma research. And then also, it began his support and the Carr family support of Musicians on Call. And Bruce ended up donating, I think, front row tickets to every show he played around the world to Musicians on Call to auction off to raise money to get the charity started, which we did in 1999. So 23 years ago, the organization officially started, and it started really with a vision of trying to bring music to Sloan Kettering, to one hospital. And fast forward, here we are now, and we've got programs in all 50 states and have played for over 1 million people. And, the programs are growing and growing, but it's, again, it's just a beautiful thing to see how music is able to help so many people, no matter what they're dealing with.
I think it only takes one experience, one program of Musicians on Call for somebody to be hooked. We were talking a little earlier of my personal experience of, I'm on the board of Musicians on Call, and I was also on the board of City of Hope. And my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer right when I landed back from my honeymoon. I lost him within 5 months. And in talking to my mom, she was like, hey, cancer was really a short part of his life, but music really is. My dad was where I got my love for music. So we thought, hey, what would be fantastic is to start a program with Musicians on Call and launch it at City of Hope. And my beloved Gavin Degraw, a good friend, one of my all-time favorite artists, surprised me. And, we launched the program at City of Hope with Gavin, in my dad's name. And I'll never forget, going to the different rooms with Gavin, watching him interact and have conversations with the patients and sing. But there's one photo that came out of that visit that is a girl who was very sick at the time, and she's looking up at Gavin, and there's just this big smile. Like the two of them are just looking at each other with these huge smiles on their faces. I almost want to cry as I'm telling this story, because when you look at that photo, it's like when a picture, says 1,000 words, it absolutely sums up that program for me, and the joy that when somebody's in their lowest moment, and that person cares enough to come in and sing for them. And we all know, I think a lot of us music lovers know that whether it's a breakup or you're not feeling well, whatever it is, we all know how music can affect us. I just will never forget that moment. And as long as obviously a lot of the other programs I've seen. For you, have there been any, special artist visits or favorite moments that you've had as part of MOC?
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's like I could spend probably weeks and weeks going through all these amazing things that happen in the hospitals, like these little miracles that happen where music is connected with people. Or, I've been in rooms where, we've gone to a patient and we walk in the room with the musician and the family's like, you don't even need to play, so-and-so is not responsive, so I don't even know if they can hear you. And we say, well, let's give it a shot. We'll just play some music for you all then. And then we're playing music, and the next thing you know, you see the person who's in the patient bed start tapping their finger to the music. And the family's like, that's the first time they've moved in weeks. And it's just like, you sit there and you're like, what's going on here? But those little, magical things happen. But I gotta say, and it's not fair to kind of pick one moment over another as being a favorite, but I got to tell you that one of the moments where I most visibly and tangibly saw music heal people was after the shooting in Las Vegas at the Route 91 festival. We didn't have any programs in Las Vegas at the time, and we decided that, you know, even though we didn't have programs there, like this was a music festival where all these people were hurt and killed. And you know, we had volunteers that were performing on stage. We had volunteers that were in the audience, and we felt really connected to what had gone on there. So we said, you know, we've got to figure out a way to help bring music and healing to these folks in the hospital, the caregivers, and the survivors as well. And so the following week after the shooting, we brought a bunch of musicians from Nashville, because it was a country music festival, to the hospital to play for these survivors of the shooting. And it was one of those things where you, as you're walking around playing, and we actually had some musicians there with us that were actually part of that festival, and you're going room to room, and you're realizing that the last time these people heard music, they were being shot at, which is crazy. And then the next time they're hearing it, it was, you know, maybe even the artist that they came to see was playing at their bedside. And you know, there was so much emotion there. The patients were crying, we were crying, the caregivers were crying. But you really saw like this transition happen where people were so hurt and scared and anxious and in pain. And then when they got the music back, it was kind of like they remembered, like, no, music isn't scary and it's not violent. It's actually loving and fulfilling and healing. And it started for a lot of people, their healing process. And I say that because that's what, you know, we've stayed in touch with some of them, and that's what they've told us afterwards. And then another incredible moment from that trip was we ended up going at night to the ER room to play for the caregivers that were working the shift where all these patients came in. At the one particular hospital, at Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas, they had 199 gunshot victims come in that evening. And you can imagine how inundated and scary and crazy that environment was for those caregivers. And so we brought music to them that night, and it was like you almost couldn't hear the music over their crying. And it was because as a caregiver, you know, they didn't take time out. Like they dealt with that night, and they didn't take a week off to mentally recover. They went to work the next day. They're in an emergency room. They have to be there because tomorrow there's going to be a whole new batch of emergencies. And so they never really had a break. And I think when we came in there that following week, it was like the first time they were able to, you know, hit the pause button and kind of like process, you know, everything they'd been through. And so providing that opportunity for people to heal, for people to feel love. I mean, the comments we got too, not just about the music, but the fact that, gosh, you got volunteers coming from around the country just to, you know, people that we don't even know coming to support us, to show us love and support when they know we're going through a tough time. The fact that strangers would do that really meant a lot to so many people. And so I think, you know, it's hard to say you have a favorite visit or favorite moment, but that one always stands out because it was just so tangible how music and volunteering helped people heal.
You just sparked so many thoughts for me, because I was part of the organization when it was mostly based around the Bruce Springsteen tickets, and seeing the evolution and the transition of, you know, Musicians on Call and the programs and the reach and everything that has expanded since the beginning. It's so impressive. But, you know, the Route 91 example is one of the ones that stands out so much to me, because it was just as much about the caregivers at that point as it was about the patients, which brings me to the last 2 years, or 2.5, where, you know, for a charity that technically should have a really hard time in a global pandemic, where the model would be going and playing in person at the bedside of patients, I have found that I'm going to give you all credit for an unbelievable ability to adapt to that and, you know, evolve and pivot the organization. And it's been some of the best years that the organization has had. You know, obviously, oddly enough, I think Musicians on Call, because of the nature of how it's set up, had unprecedented access to hospitals and caregivers and patients, because we already were in those places and had the relationships and the ability. So tell us about, during the pandemic, you know, the transition and everything that's been happening since, you know, the pandemic.
Yeah, so I I appreciate your kind words. I am going to take the credit that you gave me, and I'm going to quickly hand it off to our team and our volunteers, because the work that they did at the beginning of the pandemic laid a foundation for our entire organization moving forward. We knew, obviously, right away with the pandemic, which means you're going to have sick people in hospitals, that's contagious. Our model wasn't going to work in person. Now, the good news is at Musicians on Call, we are always pushing the envelope, especially when it comes to how do we use technology to do more. And so our team, in the couple of years before the pandemic, had already figured out how to do virtual programs to hospitals. And the reason we did that was actually because we wanted to try to get to more hospitals around the country that we weren't able to start in-person programs in. And so we had that, process and that ability. But up until the pandemic, I think we played for 2,000 people virtually ever in our history. Since the pandemic started, we've played for 275,000 people. So obviously that's a big uptick. But I think what the organization was able to do, and our team and supporters were able to do very quickly, was to reach out to our hospitals, try to increase the number of hospitals that were open to doing our Zoom performances and really growing our network there. And because of our ability to do those virtual performances, in most hospitals, we were the only program they had to offer, because we're working with hospitals during the pandemic that were having no visitors allowed, no volunteers. And I mean, when I say no visitors, I mean, we're literally talking to kids, 8-year-old kids battling cancer that could only have one parent visit them at a time. No siblings, no grandparents, no friends, no extended family. I mean, that was it. So you imagine how tough that is for a kid in general. Imagine now with no visitors or volunteers or therapy dogs or music or anything. So the fact that we were able to do our virtual programs was a huge relief to caregivers and patients and their families throughout the pandemic. And so we were very, very fortunate to have a team that was able to, quickly, adapt and grow that program for us. But then the other benefit too is that we had all these artists that were being very generous with their time and willing to do virtual programs. We were able to work with not only our normal talented volunteer musicians across the country, but some of the bigger names that people know from Dolly Parton to Olivia Rodrigo. I mean, the list goes on and on. Katy Perry. I mean, you name it, all genres of music. People were willing to, dial in from their living rooms, their bedrooms, wherever they were at, to do these virtual performances for patients across the country. And again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I wasn't calling Olivia Rodrigo directly. We had people like yourself, Alissa, and others in the music industry that were saying, hey, how can we help? What can we do? Is there any way we can connect you to these artists or these companies that are doing things? And it just speaks to the power of all of us working together to try to help people. You don't have to work at Musicians on Call or volunteer at Musicians on Call to be able to help people. But what we really benefited from was the fact that, throughout our history, the most important thing to us at Musicians on Call is our relationships with people, whether it's our volunteers, the hospitals, our supporters, our donors. And so when times were tough, because we had good relationships with people, they wanted to help us. They wanted to, work with us to help others. And I think that really allowed us to succeed and grow during the pandemic. And to your earlier point, we played for more people during the pandemic than any other time period in our history. At a time where it could have very easily gone the other way. I think in the beginning of the pandemic, it was, something like 30% of nonprofits had to shut their doors because of their inability to do their programs and raise money. And again, thanks to the great people behind us, we were able to keep things going and help a lot of people. So that was pretty amazing.
I think we actually hit a pretty amazing milestone during the pandemic too, being able to play for the 1 millionth patient. And again, that was definitely a moment you and I got to share together that was incredibly special. But let's
be honest about this first. Number one, it was an amazing moment, our 1 millionth. It's an amazing milestone, but not every organization has Alissa Pollack on their board or supporting them. And so I call Alissa. I'm sorry, I'm going to shine the light on you now, Alissa. But I call Alissa up and I said, listen, we're going to do our 1 millionth performance, and like we need to get like the biggest artist. Like I want to just swing for the fences here. What's the biggest name, you think we can try to get? And I started rattling off some names, and I was just, spitballing. And I was like, gosh, I don't know if any of this can happen. And then Alyssa's like, well, let me talk to Garth. It's like, first of all, who calls Garth Brooks Garth? Only Alissa, right? Let me talk to Garth. And next thing you know, we've got Garth Brooks lined up, thanks to Alissa, to play our 1 millionth person, which was funny. It was part of our Jason Pollack Memorial Fund programs in Staten Island, Alyssa's birthplace. And you kind of sit there and you're like, well, is there anyone in Staten Island that's going to be listening to country music or Garth Brooks? And we had this woman that was a patient. She was like 87 years old with the thickest like Staten Island, New York accent you've ever heard, and was the biggest country music fan and Garth Brooks fan you ever met. And she was just like, it was funny because Garth is like talking to her and they're shooting the breeze, and he's being so generous with his time, just like conversing with her. And finally, in like her Staten Island accent, she's like, so Garth, you gonna play a song or what? And he's like, oh yeah, sure, hold on, let me play a song. But it was amazing. It was such a brilliant moment for our 1 millionth, and thank you, Alissa, for making that happen.
Hey, Ma, it's Garth Brooks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have the accent. And that I also want to take a moment, like you, Pete, to just again, that's just that thing where the musicians, regardless of whether it's your next door neighbor, anybody that's on the chat right now, all the way up to Garth Brooks. I mean, I just want to shout out the generosity and the time and the care that all of the musicians involved with the organization put into this, because for me, Garth was somebody that was special in our house. So when we launched the program in my dad's name in my hometown, I was hoping it would be somebody that had, a personal connection to us from a music perspective. And Garth was like, I'm there. And I'm thinking, really? Like Garth Brooks? And he was actually planning to come to Staten Island and do this in person. But, after we had the pandemic going on for a while, we were like, hey, we don't know where this is going. Let's just get it launched virtually. And he was just so amazing and generous, and what a classy guy to really do that. And again, seeing that patient and how much it meant to her was, again, another one of those moments that I'll never forget. But one more thing, Pete, is that 23 years, again, all these programs, starting prom, the Christmas program, the veterans program, all the different programs that have been able to be launched during a pandemic to be able to serve more people has been absolutely incredible for you, the team, the volunteers, everybody to really be part of. What's next, right? Because I'm sure you have big plans, and with technology and all the other ways that the world is evolving, like what do you see as the vision for what's next?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I can tell you that it's something we started working on even before the pandemic, and I'm going to explain our challenges and then the solution. First of all, our problems are good ones to have. I think most people would say that's a good problem. Number one is we have so many volunteers and so many people that want to volunteer with us that we have more than we can currently use. It sounds like a nice problem, too many volunteers, but it's not, because you don't want to have someone wanting to get involved with you and then you can't use them. In some cities, we got 2 or 3 year waiting lists for people that want to volunteer with us. Another problem is we have hospitals all around the country and even around the world that are reaching out to us saying, we want musicians on call in our facility. How do we get it? That's, again, sounds like a good problem. There's demand for what we do, but it's not a good problem because we don't want these hospitals to have to wait for our program. And then the other thing too is that, we go to big hospitals in big cities because it's the best use of our resources, right? We can visit with, dozens and dozens of people in a single visit when you go to a bigger facility than if you went to a rehab facility or a post-acute care facility where there might be a smaller number of, patients in there at any given time. And so it's the best use of our volunteer time, bigger bang for their buck to see more people in their visit than less. And so we tend to go to the big hospitals. But how come we're not at smaller facilities? How come we're not in rural communities? So these are things that as an organization a couple of years ago, we said, these are challenges that we want to figure out. So again, leaning into the technology, we put our brains together and make a long story short, we're building a brand new portal, which is going to be how we deliver musicians on call moving forward, which means that when this portal is built and launched, which it will be in the fall, just in a couple months actually, musicians and volunteers, because you don't have to be a musician to actually volunteer with us, which is cool. You can be one of our volunteer guides that brings the musician around the hospital. But anyone that wants to volunteer with us can go to this portal and go through the whole process of onboarding, background check, training, and become an official volunteer of ours. In the same sense, anyone that wants musicians on call at their healthcare facility can do the same. They can go to this portal, go through the checklist of what it means to be a hospital partner of ours. And then once they complete that process, they're now an official healthcare partner of ours. Once those two parties are in this portal, they'll be able to start to schedule their own virtual and in-person visits with one another. So this way, no matter where you are, we're going to create an opportunity for people to get connected to music directly. So patients, caregivers, family members, whether they're in a rural community, at a big hospital, small hospital, they can get connected. So the great thing there is that, everyone will have access to music. It'll level the playing field on how we use music as a way to help people heal, no matter what the resources of the hospital is. And by the way, that's a question that people often ask me is like, well, do the hospitals have to pay for your program? And the answer to that is no. We don't make money a prerequisite for anyone to be part of our program, from a hospital perspective or a volunteer perspective at all. And so in that sense, you could have a small rural community health center that's going to get the same program as Sloan Kettering in New York. They can get in-person visits. They can have great musicians virtually visiting their patients. So we're really excited to get that technology launched because we do feel like it's going to be a game changer on how music is used to help people heal no matter where they are in the country. And then eventually around the world, but we're going to start here in the U.S.
That's incredible. And it's to your point, I guess those are some good problems to have, but there are obviously a lot of people, not only on this call, but in general, who want to know how can they best support musicians on call? Like, what would you say are some of the best ways to have people, whether they're volunteer musicians or just somebody who wants to help raise money, whatever it may be, what are the best ways to support musicians on call?
Yeah, so the good thing about where we're at right now is that if anyone wants to get involved volunteering with us, all they got to do is go to our website, musiciansoncall.org/volunteer. So that'll be your first stop for anyone, whether it's a hospital, a patient, or someone that wants to get involved with us in any capacity to go to. I can tell you in all honesty, at this specific moment in time, we're gearing up for the launch of this portal. So right now we're really focused on getting that portal launched so that we can then start to take on more and more volunteers. So there will be more opportunities to volunteer with musicians on call, moving forward. At the particular moment, we're trying to get this portal launched. So that's one way. And then, of course, there's a lot of people that want to support us through donations. Maybe their company wants to get involved volunteering or donating to us. But all that stuff kind of happens, through our website. And then once you get on there, then our team reaches out to you to figure out the next steps, depending upon what you want to do.
Yeah, that's great. What I have always thought about when I'm now working with the artists that we're asking to do virtual programs, I think one of the really cool things that we offer is the ability to broadcast content to thousands of hospitals at the same time. And, for musicians or brands or people looking to, be a part of bringing that healing power of music to the masses in that kind of a way, as well as, big exposure and distribution for their music and what they're doing. Can you talk a little bit about, some of the other programs that could be an opportunity for people to be involved in, like some examples?
Yeah, so we've got right now. We obviously our virtual programs are running strong. There's a number of moments we have throughout the year that are also kind of like big moments for us, and a couple of them are coming up. Number one is, even though we do veterans programs year round, we are going to do a big Veterans Day concert this November. And so that this year is going to be a combination of both an in-person concert at a VA hospital, as well as broadcasting a number of performances to all the VA hospitals around the country. So we're going to put together a concert that'll be shared with every VA facility in America, which is pretty amazing. And then during the holidays, we always do a big Hope for the Holidays concert. And that is where we get all these incredible artists to submit songs and videos to us and messages as well, so that we can put them into a concert form and we basically create a program that is shared with over 5,000 hospitals across the country. And we've been so lucky. That program has grown so much. This just this past year or two, we've had everyone from Michael Bublé and Shawn Mendes and Billie Eilish and Dolly Parton and all these huge names as part of that holiday concert. So for people that want to get involved and brands that want to get involved, those are some opportunities there. And then aside from the programs where we're playing directly for patients, we also have one of our programs which we call Musicians on Call Streaming, where we donate tablets and headphones and streaming music to hospitals so that people can listen to music while they're in their beds if they're not having a live performance at that moment. So there's a number of programs we have throughout the year that people can get involved with or sponsor, but those are some of the ones that are coming up in the short term.
Awesome. And I think anyone who's listening right now realizes you're a pretty interesting guy, right? So a really interesting background, all these different causes that you support. You're a public safety diver. I hope to see all the amazing things you're going to do, Musicians on Call, in the next 5 years. But what's next for Pete Griffin in general? What would you love to accomplish in the next 5 years?
I got to tell you, I am so excited about what we're doing with the technology right now. Like if it actually almost goes back to the first story I told about wanting to work internationally. I think in 5 years, Musicians on Call will have programs around the world. Maybe not everywhere around the world, but we're going to start to grow internationally. And to me, that's so exciting because, honestly, we all know this, but music is universal. Like everyone in every community in every corner of the globe has music that they listen to. Right? It's different and it's unique to them, but we all have music. It's the bond that kind of unites us all. And so we have a mission that lends itself to actually being one that is global, one that, an opportunity for our charity to be a global one. And so thinking about how just 23 years ago, we were operating in one hospital and had a vision to bring music to one hospital. And now we're at the point where we could be bringing music to, the far reaches of the world. I can't contain myself. It's just so exciting to think about that. And so I think that's what's got me really jazzed about the future is using technology and working with this team to really bring music to every corner of the globe.
And speaking of music that we listen to, tell us, Pete, who's your favorite artist? And more importantly, who's your guilty pleasure?
Yes. I got to tell you, I'm not going to be one of those people that says I like all these artists, because I do. But I will say I love Muse. I love the British band Muse because I feel like their music is so diverse and eclectic, and I really appreciate that. I like artists that are able to kind of, take from different styles of music and make it their own. And I feel like Muse does an incredible job of that. In terms of my guilty pleasure, I will say that when I'm driving with my daughter and we're listening to Taylor Swift, I not only love her songs, but the other day I was driving and I was like, you know what? If I was to actually list all of the Taylor Swift songs that I absolutely love, it's probably a longer list than any other artist out there. I truly think that even though I didn't say it, that Taylor Swift might be my favorite artist because of all the songs of hers that I love. So anyway, she's probably my guilty pleasure, and I'm excited that she's going to be she's getting the Songwriter of the Decade award in a few weeks here in Nashville. So yeah, I'll try not to.
I don't know if you have to feel that guilty about loving Taylor, though.
Yeah, right. No, she's amazing.
It's everyone's pleasure.
Wait, I'm not going to let you off the hook. Who's your favorite artist and your guilty pleasure?
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those I love a lot, but I think the people I am what's funny is I think people would say my guilty pleasure is Barry Manilow, but I like to say I'm a loud and proud fan of Low. I feel no guilt about loving him. Gavin Degraw, one of my favorite human beings on the planet, one of the most amazing artists, Andy Grammer, the Chainsmokers. And when I say that, it's not just that I love their music, but I love them as people. I love that they're charitable. I love, just who they are in general. So I think I gear towards, those people who I just love who they are as people as much as their music brings me joy at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I will say, though, I'm definitely biased when it comes to award show season, that I really only root for the people that volunteer with Musicians on Call.
I may or may not share Chris Martin's security when I'm at a concert. I'm just going to leave that there.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, this has been really incredible, Pete. I know there's a lot of questions. I didn't know, Tom, if maybe we want to get to some of the questions or if there's anything we should address.
Well, frankly, you've really addressed them, and you did a perfect job moderating this, Alissa, because as the questions were being asked about how can we help MOC locally, Pete, swatted that one right out of the park. Pete, are there any other things that our audience can do to support you beyond sending birthday checks today?
That would be nice. But, honestly, as much as I would love to be self-serving, the one thing I try to advocate for is that people figure out the thing that they feel most emotionally connected to. We all are connected to different things. And whatever that thing is, whatever's affected your life or your family member's life, your loved one's life, all I would say is I would advocate for you to get involved with whatever that is, whatever charity that is, whatever cause that is. I think if we all chose to do that, we'd be living in a much better world. And so focusing your energy on doing that, I think, is really great. If Musicians on Call and bringing music to people and caregivers and patients is your jam, then I'm glad you got a home with us, and we would love your support. But if it's not, that's cool. I just want everyone to kind of, take time to think about what's important to them and do their part. And I think everything will be beautiful from that point on.
And just to further to that, what I was kind of alluding to earlier about my history is I think a lot of people want to give back, but don't always know how, or don't think that they're able to. And they're like, what can I do? I think giving back is a lot more than just writing a check. As I said earlier, it's donating your time, donating your skill sets, whether that's legal skills, whether that's connections that you could make, whether that's, volunteering at events. I think people should always feel that, giving back isn't always just about money, but it's about more time is probably more valuable than anything. And every board and every charity is made up of a collection of amazing people that all find ways to give their special skill set and special, help. Yeah. And all of it together collectively is what really makes a successful, charity and cause.
Sounds like Alissa walks that talk as well, because there's no bigger volunteer for MOC than you, Alissa.
That's right.
Well, listen to you both. Again, I'm just so honored that you would come on here today. Pete, I've been stalking you for a long time. When I first heard about MOC through Scott Welch a few years ago, I was like, man, what a great idea that. Are you serious? I mean, it was kind of like the first time you heard about Uber. Duh. Well, MOC is so elegantly simple. And so I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, keep innovating. The pivot during COVID into online was genius. Just keep doing it. And Alissa, keep doing what you do, because you clearly can bring the goods.
You do, because you provide such an incredible platform for people to not only showcase what they're working on, but I think, just as somebody who loves coming on and seeing other people talk, I mean, I think this is an incredibly valuable thing that you've put together, and for all of us to learn something new. So thank you for what you're doing.
Well, amen. And back at you. To the audience, thank you for your continued support. We'll be back here next Thursday, as we customarily are. Meanwhile, be nice to each other. You got a chance to get another shot in about a month, so by golly, do it. So hopefully MOC can get back live in the hospital soon. And with that, I will sign off. Thanks again, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, MOC.
Thanks, Tom.